Holden clutched the gleaming VIP invitation tightly in his hand, the neon glow from the card casting a mocking light across his troubled face. His entire world felt as if it were unraveling thread by thread. Karen, the woman he had loved and trusted implicitly, had lied to him. The realization hit with the weight of certainty. Tomorrow night, she would attend an exclusive, lavish party, accompanied by another man. Questions buzzed relentlessly in his mind. What? How long had this been going on? Could he face the truth even if it shattered him completely? One thing was clear. He couldn't ignore the cracks in their foundation any longer. He had to uncover the truth no matter the cost. As Holden's Tesla hummed to a stop in the driveway, the sharp white beams of its headlights cut through the thick darkness. Normally, the quietness of the night would soothe him. Tonight, it suffocated him. For the fourth time this week, Karen wasn't home. He hadn't expected her, not tonight nor the previous nights, yet the ache of her absence always struck like a fresh wound. Turning off the car, Holden sat motionless, staring at the lifeless silhouette of their once cozy home. It used to be a sanctuary, a haven filled with laughter and warmth. Now it felt barren, as though the walls themselves had turned against him. Finally, with a resigned sigh, he stepped out of the car and into the biting cold of the night air. The door creaked open, its hollow sound echoing in the stillness as he entered. The house greeted him with an oppressive silence. He tossed his keys onto the entryway table, the clatter ricocheting through the emptiness. In the living room, the couch sat unused, its cushions perfectly arranged, mockingly pristine in its abandonment. His eyes drifted toward the kitchen, where only the faint glow of a forgotten light broke the darkness. Karen's absence lingered like a phantom, haunting every corner of their shared space. He pulled out his phone from his pocket, his thumb hesitating over the screen. No new messages. Her last text stared back at him. "I'm busy today. Talk later." So curt. So cold. It shouldn't have stung, but it did. Everything about her lately stung. The way her voice lacked its former warmth, the way her gaze skimmed over him as though he were a ghost. As Holden scrolled aimlessly through his phone, a sharp knock on the door startled him. When he opened it, Sarah, their neighbor, stood on the other side, her expression laced with concern. "No Karen tonight?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. Holden forced a grim smile. "She's working late. Marketing deadlines and all that?" Sarah tilted her head, doubt flickering in her eyes, but she let it go. "Well, if you need anything, just holler," she said softly before retreating to her own home. Holden closed the door behind him, the exchange leaving him feeling even more hollow. It wasn't just about Karen's absences anymore. Something deeper was amiss. The silence of the house wrapped around him like a noose, tightening with every passing second. When he entered their bedroom, the sight stopped him cold. Karen's side of the room was uncharacteristically chaotic. Clothes scattered haphazardly, drawers half open. It was a stark contrast to the woman who used to meticulously fold everything, her neatness a point of pride. His heart pounded as he approached the nightstand. There, half hidden beneath a pile of discarded papers, lay a postcard. Its bright, glossy surface caught the light, taunting him. Picking it up, Holden's pulse quickened as he read the bold print. Club Nexus VIP night, invitation only. The swirling neon colors screamed exclusivity, luxury, excitement. But it wasn't the aesthetics that sent his stomach plummeting. Tomorrow night's date glared back at him. Karen had told him she'd be having dinner with her parents. For a fleeting moment, he considered the possibility of a misunderstanding, but the fine print at the bottom of the card crushed that hope. RSVP by tonight? The timeline was clear. The lie was unmistakable. Holden dropped the card onto the bed as though it had burned him. His mind spiraled into chaos. The late nights. The curt messages. The evasive glances. The way she avoided his touch as if it repelled her. All the moments he had brushed off as exhaustion or work stress now painted a sinister picture. He grabbed his phone, his hands trembling as he typed out a message. "Where are you? I found the postcard. You didn't mention this?" He hit send, the seconds stretching into torturous eternity as he awaited a reply. Nothing. Just silence. The phone vibrated suddenly, and his heart leapt, only for disappointment to crash down when he saw Sarah's name flashing on the screen. "Hey Holden. You okay? Just checking in." He ignored the message, his focus fixated on the postcard mocking him from the bed. He couldn't ignore the truth anymore. The Karen he had known, the woman who had vowed forever, was slipping through his fingers. When his phone buzzed again, Karen's name illuminated the screen. His breath hitched as he answered. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone clipped, almost defensive. Holden's voice trembled with barely restrained anger. Where are you going tomorrow night, Karen? Don't lie to me. I know about the party. The silence that followed was damning. I told you, I'm having dinner with my parents, she said finally, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. Holden's jaw tightened. I'll be at Club Nexus. Let's see who you're really spending your time with. Before she could respond, he ended the call, his chest heaving with a volatile mix of fury and heartbreak. As he stared at the neon postcard, one thought consumed him. This was about more than a party. It was about betrayal. It was about trust. Tomorrow he would confront the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. Holden stepped out of the house, his heart hammering against his ribs as he strode toward his car. The cold night air nipped at his skin, but he barely noticed it, his thoughts a storm of emotions, fury, heartbreak, betrayal. This was just the beginning. The pulsing bass of Club Nexus hit him like a physical force the moment he stepped through the entrance. Neon lights flickered and danced across a crowd caught in a whirlwind of music, laughter, and shadows. The invitation in his hand had been his key to the truth, a truth he wasn't sure he was ready to face. But there was no turning back now. Holden's gaze swept the room, scanning faces blurred by strobing lights until he found her. Karen. She sat at a corner table, her sleek black dress hugging her figure in a way that made her look effortlessly stunning. Her laughter rang out, clear and carefree, as she leaned into the man beside her. Blake. The sight of them together was a dagger to Holden's heart. Blake's hand rested on the small of her back, a gesture far too intimate for mere business acquaintances. They leaned close, their whispers and laughter cutting through Holden like shards of glass. His fists clenched at his sides as memories surged to the surface. Moments when Karen had been distant, the late nights she'd claimed weren't work emergencies, the evasive answers to his questions. It all clicked into place, the lies forming a chain that now felt like a noose around his neck. She looked happy. Happy. Holden's chest tightened at the realization. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung, it was the undeniable truth that she'd found joy somewhere else with someone else. He took a step closer, his movements deliberate, his mind a mix of raw emotions. The music throbbed in his ears, but all he could hear was her laughter, a sound that no longer belonged to him. As he approached their table, he caught snippets of their conversation, the words blending with the music like a cruel symphony. Karen's voice, soft and light, was a sound he hadn't heard in months. This doesn't look like your parents' house, Holden said, his voice slicing through the chaos like a blade. Karen's laughter froze mid-note, her head snapping toward him. Her eyes widened in shock, guilt flickering across her face like a shadow. Holden, she stammered, her voice trembling. Blake shifted beside her, his posture growing defensive. What are you doing here? He demanded, his tone dripping with condescension. Holden's gaze never wavered. I could ask you the same, he replied coldly. But I think I already know the answer. Karen's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Her silence was louder than any confession. Holden's heart sank deeper, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on him like a physical force. Blake, right? Holden said, his voice sharper now. The business partner who's been keeping my wife company while she lies to my face. Blake stood, his expression smug. You don't understand the situation, he said, stepping toward Holden. Holden's jaw tightened. Oh, I understand perfectly, he spat. You've been playing me for a fool. The tension crackled in the air like static electricity. Blake smirked, a look that pushed Holden over the edge. Before he could think, his fist connected with Blake's jaw, the impact reverberating through his entire body. Blake staggered backward, crashing into the table behind him as glass shattered and patrons gasped. The club erupted into chaos. Some people cheered, others pulled out their phones to record, while a few called for security. Karen screamed, rushing toward Holden, but he shrugged her off. Blake recovered quickly, wiping blood from the corner of his mouth. His eyes blazed with anger as he lunged at Holden, landing a solid punch to his stomach. Holden grunted, the pain sharp but fueling the fire within him. He retaliated, grabbing Blake by the collar and shoving him into a nearby wall. You think you can take what's mine and walk away? Holden growled, his voice low but seething with rage. Blake swung again, but Holden dodged, landing another blow that sent Blake to the floor. The crowd buzzed with energy, some shouting for more, others urging them to stop. But Holden's world had narrowed to this moment, to this confrontation. Stop it. Karen's voice broke through the noise, her tone pleading. Holden, please? Holden turned to her, his chest heaving, his fists still clenched. Stop, he said, his voice quieter but no less intense. You want me to stop after everything? After the lies? After him? Tears streamed down Karen's face as she reached for him, but he stepped back, the pain in his eyes cutting deeper than any words. You made your choice, Karen, he said, his voice cracking. You chose him. You chose this. Security guards finally intervened, pulling Holden away. He didn't resist, he had nothing left to fight for. As they escorted him out, he cast one last look at Karen, her face a portrait of guilt and regret. But it was too late. The damage was done. Outside, the night was cold and still, a stark contrast to the chaos within. Holden leaned against his car, his breath visible in the icy air. The neon lights of Club Nexus glowed in the distance, a cruel reminder of the life he thought he had. He climbed into the driver's seat, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. His reflection in the rearview mirror stared back at him, haunted and broken. As the engine roared to life, he drove off into the night, the weight of betrayal pressing down on him like a heavy shroud. Nothing would ever be the same again. Part 1, The Fallout begins. Holden didn't resist as the security guards escorted him out of Club Nexus. The muffled thrum of music and the chaotic voices inside faded, replaced by the eerie silence of the cold night. The chill in the air bit at his skin, but it did little to numb the ache in his chest. His steps were uneven as he trudged to his car, the events of the night replaying in sharp, vivid detail. Sliding into the driver's seat, Holden gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Fury mixed with heartbreak surged through him, an unrelenting storm of emotions that left him breathless. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a vibration that echoed louder than it should have in the stillness of the car. He didn't need to check to know it was Karen. Her messages would be filled with apologies, excuses, pleas. But Holden didn't open them. His jaw tightened as he tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. She'd made her choice and now he had to make his. As the car sped away, the neon lights of the club blurred in the rearview mirror. The cityscape stretched out before him, a maze of blurred lights and shadows, but Holden wasn't focused on the road. His mind churned with the weight of betrayal. Somewhere deep in his fractured heart, beneath the pain, there was a glimmer of relief. It was over. Part 2, Facing the Morning. The next morning, sunlight pierced through the blinds, dragging Holden from a restless sleep. He lay there for a moment, staring blankly at the ceiling. The silence in the room was deafening, but unlike the oppressive quiet of betrayal, it carried an air of finality. As the memories of the previous night washed over him, Holden felt an unexpected sense of clarity. He couldn't keep living in this limbo of lies and deceit. It was time to act. He picked up his phone and dialed the number he'd saved weeks ago, Olivia Chun, a sharp and unrelenting divorce lawyer. The call connected almost immediately. Holden, Olivia greeted, her tone professional yet warm. Are you ready to move forward? Holden's voice was steady but heavy with resolve. I am. Let's get started. The rest of the morning was a whirlwind of decisions. Holden began to pack away remnants of the life he had shared with Karen. Photos, keepsakes, and memories he once held dear. They were meaningless now, nothing more than painful reminders of a life built on broken promises. The house felt different as he worked, emptier but also lighter. Each item he discarded was a step toward reclaiming his space, his life. By the time he changed the locks on the front door, the house felt less like a tomb of memories and more like a blank slate. Part 3, The Confrontation. Later that afternoon, Holden returned home from his meeting with Olivia. As he stepped inside, his heart sank. Karen stood in the living room, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked up at him, her face a portrait of desperation and regret. Holden, please, she began, her voice trembling. We need to talk. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he crossed his arms and spoke, his voice cold and deliberate. What's left to talk about, Karen? You made your choice. I'm just following through. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she stepped closer. It was a mistake, she pleaded. I didn't mean for it to happen. I still love you. Holden raised a hand to stop her, his voice firm and unwavering. Love. Don't use that word. If you loved me, you wouldn't have lied. You wouldn't have betrayed everything we built together. Her sobs grew louder, her shoulders shaking as she tried to reach for him. But Holden stepped back, the distance between them now unbridgeable. I'm done, he said simply. You destroyed us, Karen. There's nothing left to save. Part 4, The Turning Point. That evening, Holden met with Olivia to finalize the paperwork. She reviewed the documents with a precision that only reinforced his decision. "We're in a strong position," she assured him, her voice calm. "The sooner we file, the sooner you can move on." Holden nodded, the weight of the decision settling over him. "I want this resolved quickly," he said. "No delays. No drama. I'm done with her games." With a steady hand he signed the papers. The act felt symbolic, as if he were severing the final tether that had bound him to Karen. As he left Olivia's office, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in shades of gold and indigo. For the first time in months, Holden felt a flicker of hope. Part 5. A New Beginning. The house was eerily quiet when Holden returned, but this time the silence didn't weigh him down. It felt peaceful. He walked through each room, taking in the emptiness, the stillness that was now entirely his. His phone buzzed again, but he didn't bother checking. Without hesitation he blocked Karen's number. Enough was enough. As the evening stretched on, Holden sat on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand. The cool breeze carried with it a sense of renewal. He thought about the life he had shared with Karen, the laughter, the love, the promises. They had been real once, but they no longer defined him. The betrayal that once consumed him had faded into something quieter, something that no longer held power over him. The stars twinkled in the night sky, and for the first time in a long while, Holden allowed himself to dream about the future. It wouldn't be easy, but he wasn't afraid. The unknown wasn't a threat, it was a promise. As he leaned back in his chair, Holden took a deep breath, savoring the freedom that came with it. The past was behind him. The road ahead was his to forge. And this time he would write a story worth telling.